Hello, I'm Nito Cobain. Welcome to Side by Side. My guest today thought he'd follow his dad's footsteps and go into the furniture business. Instead, he followed his dad's dream. His father always dreamed of owning a restaurant. My guest did that and much more. He became one of North Carolina's most notable chefs. He's also a minister, an entrepreneur, a philanthropist. He says, "What's in my heart is on your plate." Today we'll meet Chef Jimmy Noble.
Funding for Side by Side with Nito Cobain is made possible by...
We started small, just 30 people in a small town in Wisconsin. 75 years later, we employ more Americans than any other furniture brand. But none of that would have been possible without you. Ashley, this is home.
For 60 years, the Bud Group has been a company of excellence, providing facility services to customers, opportunities for employees, and support to our communities. The Bud Group, great people, smart service.
Coca-Cola Consolidated is honored to make and serve 300 brands and flavors locally. Thanks to our teammates. We are Coca-Cola Consolidated, your local bottler.
Jimmy Noble, you are known across the state and beyond our state as a person who is a great chef, a great restaurateur, a business leader in your own right. You have, 7, 8, 9 restaurants now? And I'm intrigued to know, how do you know when to start a restaurant? What menu should you have in that restaurant? And how do you know it's going to work?
Well, the first restaurant we had in High Point, the phone number was 889 Deli. It was going to be a delicatessen, and I had gone to New York and looked at delis like Katz and Stage, and I wanted to come back and do a big sandwich restaurant. And halfway through construction, I changed it to a French restaurant. I had been studying food and wine for probably 2 or 3 years before I got into the business, and probably because I really enjoy dining a lot myself personally. Growing up as a kid, my favorite time was Thanksgiving and Christmas, not for the gifts, but because everybody brought that food together and we could spend time with family and sit down at a table and really have a great smorgasbord of food. So I kind of got into it because I enjoy food so much.
And your dad was a well-known furniture sales professional, and you went to NC State. You wanted to study furniture manufacturing management, right?
I was in I'm still an industrial engineer today, but it was for furniture manufacturing management.
And you went a completely different direction. And now 7 of your 9 locations are in Charlotte. Charlotte is a dynamic city. Does the location have a lot to do with the restaurant, more than the menu, more than demographics? What is it that makes a restaurant truly successful?
All those things are important, but I would probably say the people in the restaurant is probably the most important thing. There's restaurants in New York, people take you to, you really don't know how you got in it. It was unnoticeable, but you found a place and a way to get in. But here it makes a bigger difference. And when we opened in High Point, there really weren't many fine restaurants in the day. There were steakhouses and some things like that. But really, people is probably the most important thing. I tell my chefs, you have a 3-part job. It's like a 3-legged stool. Any one of these legs falls, you're not going to make it. You got to know your craft. You got to be a chef and know how to cook. You got to be able to manage money, which is labor costs and food costs. But third and most importantly, you got to
That's the chef's job?
Yeah, he's in charge of his funds. He's got to make sure he keeps his food costs and prices right.
I see.
We always watching labor. Which is from engineering, motion, and time study, but the people part is the most important. He's got to be able to raise up and
people
build a
as
team.
in hospitality, as in hiring, as in service.
Getting along with people and being a servant leader where you build a team to carry the vision and carry the reason when I was here last, I was asking you about this, your culture and how you changed it when you got here. Because we've been going through the last 2 or 3 years just really changing and focusing on our culture and vision for our company. And it makes a huge difference. And when you say, this is who we are, this is our vision, well, you hadn't even started yet, So you always cast vision before you start. And then we got we've done some strategic operations planning the last 7 or 8 years, which is a strat-up process by Tom Patterson. And we looked at where are we, where we want to go, how we're going to get there, what's right, what's wrong, what's missing, what's confusing. And we took an analytical look at ourselves and decided how we're going to grow to 25 restaurants. That's our goal at some point. But if you never make a plan, you just kind of drift through life. So we started planning, and they say if you plan your work and work your plan will work. So as we started doing that, I also heard something that Peter Drucker, who said Tom Patterson's greatest process thinker he's ever seen, he also said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So at the same time, like, this is what our culture, we decided, here's our core values, this is what we believe, this is what we're doing. And people say, well, that's not who you are. This is where we're going. So you have to cast culture just like you do vision. And people part, people ask me, I always say I'm in the restaurant business. And Karen said, why don't you say I own restaurants? That's my wife. And I would say, well, we're in the restaurant business and we're really in the people business because it's about the people that we hire, the people that we serve. And for many years, I had ways I looked at the number one person, the most important person was the customer, then our staff, then our purveyors, then the community, then the investors last. Because if you put the investors first, you'll make decisions you shouldn't. We opened it's been really, God bless us with a barbecue restaurant. It's a pretty good size. We have a smokehouse that's about 2,000 square feet. I built it so people would want to tour it. And when we were getting ready to open, I brought the investors in and I said to them, I said, my goal here is not to make money. My goal here is to make the best barbecue we can in the Southeast. If I make great barbecue, the money will follow. So I changed that and I put my customer number two, my staff and my employees number one. We went through this process and the guy said that was doing this, he learned it from Tom Patterson. He said the only other person that did that was Southwest Airlines, put their staff ahead of their clients. And if I take care of my staff, they take care of our clients and our customers that come in. And again, it's a people business. You can go to a restaurant, the food's great, the atmosphere is great, the service is great, but you go, or you can go to a place and it doesn't always click, but the people are nice, you love them, you go because of who the people are there. For us, I think, and I'm a chef and I hate to admit it, but the food's not the most important thing, but it is important. But how you treat your staff and how they treat the customers is most important.
Yeah, you know, when I go to a restaurant, I guess I don't think about all the things that you think about. You're running the operations, so you have to think about all those. I think first about the maitre d' and the person who welcomes me. If they are, when you go to cities like New York or Palm Beach, and there's just tremendous demand for the restaurants, I watch to see how kind they are, how hospitable, whether they're smiling, whether they know me by name, whether it takes them 3 minutes to find the reservation, whether they act like they're too busy and too preoccupied. That's the first impression. And then the server becomes very, very important. The best meal served by someone who's unkind, inhospitable, you know, sort of ruins the evening for you, right? And then, of course, the meal is important. But that's my experience as a customer. Your experience is running these different operations all at the same time. So from a business perspective, I'm intrigued. Do you act like chef in any of those restaurants now?
I don't wear a chef coat anymore. I did for a long time. My main focus is the food. I've got a team. I've got a CFO and a COO. And I soon have a chief marketing person, and then I'll also have a chief culinary officer. And the guys working with us is moving towards that way. I need to get a little bit bigger before I could engage that, but I'm thinking about that position. But my main focus is food and how it executes. I'm looking at everything. It's,
how do you decide in these different restaurants what the menu is going to be? Why do you have one that's barbecue and one that is, a cafe type of place? One is a sandwich. What makes you think that? Do you do research? Do you get consultants? Do you just pray about it and it comes to you?
I would say barbecue. I grew up here in High Point, and there's Kepley's was right nearby, but Lexington was where I always wanted to go. I got to know Wayne Monk and Ricky Monk and those guys. I didn't work there, but I went to school there. I asked questions that take me to Smokehouse. In fact, their mason helped us design our pits in Charlotte, and I did it because I'd want to do barbecue. I had wanted to do it for probably 30 years.
How does a barbecue restaurant work? Run me through the process of preparing barbecue.
It's totally different. I cook everything before they get there, and otherwise, and every other restaurant, I didn't cook it till the last second. I wanted to cook it to order, but in barbecue, you have to cook it a day in advance. I have pits. We run about 5 or 6 meats. Excuse me. And we load those meats twice a day, one for lunch, one for dinner, and we're always for the
And
brisket.
is it a whole?
No, I do Lexington style or Western style pork. I use butts, or not the whole shoulder.
I see.
And I did it, and I get skinless butts because I want that bark, which is on the outside, which is my favorite. When I go to Lexington, I always tell them I want the coarse brown tray, which is that outside edge. But when you have a whole shoulder, you only have that much. But if you skin it, you got the whole thing is dark. So we chopped the coarse in there with it. But it was hard to all of a sudden switch my way of thinking about doing barbecue. When we opened, my son helped us, and he was working there as a servant, and he was training other waiters. He said, now listen, if you go put your order in, you better turn your bar order in first, because if you turn your food order in the bar at the same time, the food's gonna beat the bar.
Yeah.
Because it's ready, and we chop it to order, but we've set it up in a system.
Or the salad and the entree come at the same time.
Yeah.
I've had that happen to me. It's kind of crazy. How did you deal with supply chain and with labor shortages in the post-COVID era, which is just a short time ago?
For the major folks like my beef guy in Kansas, it's Creekstone Farms. I stayed in touch with them all the time and try to stay ahead of the curve. We always buy the beef or the brisket, which is not a normal barbecue in North Carolina, but it's great barbecue. And we studied it and went to Texas and built tanks like they did there. I stay in touch with them and my chicken guy and the pork folks. All that we use that smoke is Noble Smoke. It's premium meats. So our barbecue, I pay 2 or 3 times what the normal barbecue places pay for their local pork. And we dealt with them, worked with them. If something ran out, the prices went up. There was a certain point I couldn't raise my price anymore, but my price kept going up, so our food costs got out of line for a little while. But trying to stay ahead of it. And the good news is that during this time when we had to shut our restaurants down, our ministry side, which is our King's Kitchen and the church and the Dream Center, we turned the restaurants into food manufacturing facilities, and we started producing meals. We did 170,000 meals within 12 months, keeping my staff working and going into the communities and neighborhoods we go to where the need was bad because people lost their job, they couldn't work, so we started taking food to people.
And you were giving them the food?
Yes, oh yeah. My wife and I started a ministry in '98, which is mostly a radio teaching ministry, and around 2001 or so, we did a thing at the High Point restaurant where we invited all the homeless folks in, and we had more volunteers than we did homeless, but I realized the restaurants and the ministry could partner together, which became the King's Kitchen in downtown Charlotte, where a lot of the homeless population is visible. And we opened it up with the premise, one, we're gonna do 2 things. Our vision hasn't changed in the 14 years we've been planning for it when we opened. Was to raise money through profits and solicitation to feed the poor. And then secondly, do a job training, faith-based discipleship program where we teach them a skill, but we also take them through Bible study. And we teach them that the most, here's how I say it, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, the most upwardly mobile institution on the earth is the body of Christ. So we teach them how to trust God, believe God for whatever problems they're going through. God usually has a promise in His Word somewhere, and how do we trust Him to find it? And so that became the King's Kitchen, which later birthed the church, and then from that we birthed the Dream Center, which is like the Los Angeles Dream Center.
Yes. It's great work, and we thank you for it, Jimmy. So the labor shortage, how did you manage that? I heard from a lot of people that it's very difficult to find people to come and work. It's gotten a little better now, but for a while there, it was very difficult to do. How did you keep your restaurants open?
I would say working on our culture probably made it better. For example, if half the workforce is not working, that means that 50%, all the restaurants will run 50%, but if your culture is better and you're pushing hard and training, we're getting the cream of the crop. And we had some tough times where we didn't have quite enough and we cut our hours a little bit, but we tried to stay open as much as we could. When they said you can open up one table, I didn't open it. We were very cautiously aggressive about opening back up, and I noticed that restaurants that opened real slow, they never got momentum back up. And we opened 2 restaurants during COVID, and they were tougher to get started because we didn't have the momentum of a business. Once a business is open, it starts running, it gets its own momentum, and as long as you have great team members in there with it, it helps it run. But getting it started was tough. But I had, in this culture thing where we like, you know, the book Good to Great, get the right people on the bus,
Yes.
get the right people off the bus. We had some people that had to get off the bus, and as soon as I got off the bus, the person that came on and took their place started hiring people and said, we can hire, we can do it. And another guy said, we can't hire anybody, we can't open. And it's all about attitude.
Attitude and mindset, yes.
Yep.
Attitude and mindset. So, Jimmy, give me a quick lesson in running a restaurant, to the extent that you're free to divulge some secrets of the trade.
There's no secrets.
I've always thought that food is about a third of the cost of the ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Labor and other stuff is a third, and a third is sort of the general stuff, marketing, profit, etc. Where am I wrong?
Well, forever, the labor cost is like 25%. These are just general restaurant rule of thumb, pretty much on all levels. Well, for full service restaurant, 15% back of the house, which is the chef, and 10% front of the house. And then we try to run food costs, and before 33%, but now our target is much less. As things have changed and we offered more services, we had to charge more. When the food costs were going up and labor costs were going up, there's two numbers together is a very important number. If you can get it 50 to 55 combined, you're doing great. If it goes over 60, you're probably not making money. So when our labor house went up, we had to drop our food costs a little bit, and just to try to make that thing balance. Otherwise, we wouldn't make it. But it's always, and it's not tough math. It's just algebra equations, but really just managing your dollars.
So how does, I was in New York last week, and if you order steak in some nice restaurant, you could spend anywhere from $65 to $95.
I've seen them 120.
It could be 120. I'm friends with a guy called Chris Pappas who owned Allen Brothers for a long time, which is a very, very fine steak wholesale supplier to the finest restaurants. And if you go online, just retail online to buy one of their steaks, it could be anywhere from $80 to $160, $180. And I often wondered, is that for real? I mean, is a $90 steak significantly better than a $50 steak? Is it just a markup, or is it really the cut cost that restaurants so much more?
Well, we're getting ready to open a steakhouse in a year or so. I'm going to use prime beef. I'm going to use a couple of smaller farmers that raise their own cattle. And the ribeye, we had one of them last night, and I cut them this thick. I call them goat head steaks because when you hold it, it looks like a goat head. But then we kind of cut them like beefsteak of Fiorentina. That price on that beef now is at $20 a pound before I go to yield, and I may get 50, 60, 70% based on the cut of meat. So you may have $20, $30 in a steak. Well, you got to at least mark it up. At least the highest you can go is 33%. In a steakhouse, it's not as much labor. Well, I'm saying this, and you have a steakhouse, and I don't, but on campus.
Yes.
But your ticket is higher, and you can run a little bit higher food costs and lower labor costs because the higher the ticket,
Takes less time.
the labor,
Yeah.
it goes down in percentage wise.
Sure.
And I run everything off percentages, but there are steaks out there that they're expensive. And I remember in High Point here, I was afraid to go over the $20 mark on an entree. I'm talking about a full-blown entree. And
Yes.
that was back in the 80s,
Yes.
right? But now, they're 40 and 50 sometimes in some places. It's just,
yeah. What about gratuities? I mean, we as consumers, we as guests in restaurants, we wonder about these things. So in Europe, quite often, they expect no gratuity or 10% gratuity. Here, so many of them now, they bring the bill, and there's a service charge already there. Then there's an additional gratuity line. In many restaurants now, they give you the total, and then they put 15, 18, 20, sometimes 22, 25.
Suggestions, right?
Yeah, you suggest it. You see it in fast food restaurants sometimes, or what I call fast food restaurants. If you go into a Starbucks, for example, or somewhere like that. I've often wondered, and I'm going to reveal something to you that you might hate me for. I've often wondered, when I put that tip there, does it go to that person who served me well? For example, if I give them an extra tip, because they made it a great experience, does it go in their pocket? Is it divided up over the entire staff? And so I have been known to put the tip on the paper, but then slip a little cash with that and say to them, that's for you. And I never know if that's proper, improper. Does it cause concerns in a restaurant? Does it cause the person to, mislead? Or does he get in trouble for that?
Well, I would think the restaurants do it whichever way they choose to do it. Our staff gets their tips. They do tip out to the bartender a little bit and some other service.
So if you leave someone 20%, they get the 20%.
They get like 18%.
They might voluntarily tip a bartender.
Yeah, well, it's directed on our side because the bartender's doing the work. But
yes.
But like for example, at the Chicken Shack, you walk up to the counter, it's like walking to Waffle House, but you order here and you pick a chicken sandwich up down here, and they have the option to tip. It would just happen, but it really goes to our staff, and they pull those tips. And if you come to a full service restaurant, you tip your server, it goes to him. But I think it's a fair question anytime you ask, do y'all pull your tips or does your tip go to you?
What does pull your tips mean? You
put it
take
on
out
one pull and split it up evenly.
I see. Oh, pull yours. I see.
For the longest time, country clubs pull tips and then they pay them an hourly rate. And you notice that service was not as good at country clubs as it was restaurants. And I was always vehemently against pulling tips because you got a guy over here who doesn't carry his weight. It's not fair for him to get the same cut.
But then how does the person in the kitchen get tipped? They don't get tipped.
They don't. Now, some restaurants, because of the last 2 or 3 years we've been through, they've added service for the kitchen. They've added service fees on top of what. There's just a flat fee. I mean, they're adding stuff I never had. I haven't done that. I just said let it be like it was.
What about the bus staff, the busing staff?
They're part of the tip pool. They get a little bit of a percentage from the server.
I see.
So the server has a bartender and an SA who's helping him. So part of his tip.
It's in their best interest to take care of them.
Yeah.
I see. Very, very interesting. What's the most challenging thing that you have in your business now? You said culture. We know inflation has something to do with it. Food prices, labor prices and shortages. What challenges you the most?
Probably the culture and the people part in having the right people. You can have a guy, we interviewed a guy for an exec chef and all the credentials look good and you get down, you talk to him, he come in 2 interviews, we flew him in, and then he leaves, and then you go, well, we're going to offer him a job or not. Then you really don't know until they show up and go to work. People present themselves pretty well. Of course. I also, if we're hiring a leadership position, I get involved, but I let my team decide too, and I ask them, what do you think? I mean, because you're going to be the one that's got to work with them every day, and I want you to have input on this thing. The people part, but at this point in my career, it's the best it's ever been. And when we had one store, it was hard to run a store. I mean, so what's 2, 3, 4, 5? You build a team and they help carry the weight with you. But never. Sometimes I get a lot of credit, but really, never forget, I'm just one of a ton of people that make it happen, and you can't. Nothing great ever happens by one person. It's always
true. That's true in any organization, right?
Yes.
I've often wondered. I've seen it in many restaurants, usually fine restaurants, where if you come a little early or you just check in, you'll see the maitre d' speaking to all the staff in advance. Is that a routine thing in a restaurant? Talking about the specials, going over who's going to be there, or remind them to be kind and so on and so forth?
A lot of stuff, like even the name maitre d' comes from the French maitre d'hotel. He was the guy that did run the floor. He didn't serve you, but he ran the floor. He wasn't necessarily the host or the hostess that set you, but he was in charge. He's like a general manager, but he was of a higher trained caliber than we see a lot of times. But everybody on the team is, one of the things in our culture and what we're looking for in ideal team players is we want to put a man on the moon. And this happened when Tom Patterson went to visit NASA, and he went to the restroom, and the man in there was mopping the floor. He said, "How you doing today, sir?" He said, "We're doing great, just trying to get a man on the moon." Everybody on the organization was trying to go for the same vision to get the man on the moon, and we try to instill that with our staff too, that everybody knows we're all in this together, we're all working, and if we all pull together in the right direction, it opens so many doors.
Yeah, that's the ideal. I wonder if you see any differences among more mature members of your staff versus young ones just coming in, asking for work-life balance and I want more and I want to do less. Some of them, not all of them, but some in our society today want to do less than but get paid just as much and so on. How do you deal with that issue? You just don't hire them.
I won't, if they come to me with that, I mean, we have one of our leaders has been with me for 15 years, and he says, I don't want to change. I want to do more work-life balance. So you're probably going to go from salary to hourly. And
Yeah.
I work it backwards for what you were doing, but I can't have you as a leader because, I mean, restaurant business is demanding, and most the professionals in there were working 70, 80 hours a day. One of our core values is we honor families. So I said, we're going to work 50 to 60, but that's it. After that, go home. And I got this great young man who has a tendency to want to keep working. I said, go home, go see your son, go see your wife, go do it, because then you're going to enjoy life better.
That's part of your values, fundamental values for the organization. That's why you've been blessed, because you're a very successful business person, but you also care deeply about society and the community and people in need, and you're doing it and helping those who are among the least of your brothers and sisters, and for that, we honor you. Jimmy Noble, thank you for all you've done, and best wishes on all you're yet to do.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. It's an honor to be with you.
Funding for Side by Side with Nito Cobain is made possible by
We started small, just 30 people in a small town in Wisconsin. 75 years later, we employ more Americans than any other furniture brand. But none of that would have been possible without you. Ashley, this is home.
For 60 years, the Bud Group has been a company of excellence, providing facility services to customers, opportunities for employees, and support to our communities. The Bud Group, great people, smart service.
Coca-Cola Consolidated is honored to make and serve 300 brands and flavors locally. Thanks to our teammates. We are Coca-Cola Consolidated, your local bottler.